What happens? Time warp. Time. Let's drop by the Hummingbird Drive-In and find out.
There she goes. Wow. Now we just have to hope that it finds the feeder.
Gee, that took a long time.
Compared to a human being, how often does it have to feed itself every day?
Probably about every 20 minutes or so. I think the estimate is they feed about 2.5 to 3 times their body weight a day.
Coincidence. That's just about Matt's daily intake as well.
All right, guys, I've got the high speed rolling, so all we need is a little feeding to go on here.
There we go.
Oh,
You got it.
Perfect.
Now this gets it down to the basics at 5,000 frames per second.
This is just beautiful footage to show us how the wing is rotating and how it's changing its camber or its curvature as it's moving during the downstroke versus flipping over during the upstroke.
You're looking at 40 time-warped wing beats per second.
Is that the tongue right there?
Yeah, that's the tongue that's sticking out of the tip of the bill, and that's what the bird uses to slosh the nectar back as it's drinking. One reason it needs to hold its head stationary is to be able to position the tongue in a very precise way to be able to obtain the nectar.
When we eat and move at the same time, we end up with a shirt full of mustard. To understand the hummingbird's trick for in-flight dining, we need to go inside again, but inside the bird itself.
So this is the X-ray machine.
These are the
This X-ray machine shoots 1,000 pictures per second. We're going to put a spin on the classics by combining high-speed and X-ray photography. For the first time, we'll discover how a hummingbird stabilizes its head for in-flight feeding.
And the bird's in place now? We're ready to
Right,
take
the
it?
bird is well positioned for these recordings.
Put on the lead parka, lest some private bits get irradiated.
That's it.
Done.
Got it.
It's all over in a second with minimal radiation exposure to the hummingbird. The dark spots in the image are markers highlighting areas of interest.
So nobody has seen this kind of footage before. What have you learned right away from us seeing it?
So you can see one shoulder marker that's floating around in the back there, and that large mass that's sloshing back and forth is the fluid that's contained in the crop.
The crop is a temporary holding tank for the incoming nectar before it passes into the stomach.
It's moving completely out of phase with the wing stroke, so when the wing moves up, it sloshes forward, and when the wing moves down and forward, it sloshes back. It's a very good solution for stabilizing their head to keep it still when they're feeding the nectar from the feeder.
And guess what? Before today, nobody had ever seen this before.
That was a totally novel finding. We hadn't expected, or we weren't even thinking of looking for that.
So it seems like we might have a totally new discovery just in a couple
Absolutely.
minutes.
That's what makes science so much fun, is you go in with a particular idea in mind of something we wanted to see, and then find out that the film reveals something different that you hadn't expected to be there.
Totally new.
So just when you think you've seen it all before, you see something brand new. Nectar not only powers a hummingbird's muscles, but also helps to stabilize its head to feed in flight. Amazing, sure, but so are you. The fluid in your inner ear works somewhat the same. Sensors in the ear respond to gentle sloshing back and forth and keep you in a state of equilibrium.